Hi, Jennifer and Kirsten. I'm Janine Butler. I'm a deaf writing professor who studies sound and rhetoric. I have a few questions for you about your chapter, which I believe is highly valuable for instructors and scholars who aim to make sound studies more inclusive. To summarize your approach, we engage in sound listening when we learn from the many ways that all individuals experience sound, and when we open up our sound writing theories, rhetorics, and pedagogies to more bodies, including, in your words, those that do not audate. The term audate jumped out at me as a term that could help scholars formulate our understanding of how each body experiences sound. Could you unpack the term audate? Explain how that term could supplement other terms in sound studies, and reflect on how that term could help us appreciate the multiplicity of sonic experiences?
So I am really honored that Dr. Butler has submitted questions about our piece. And the first question that she asks is a reference to the phrase in the text about creating sonic experiences for bodies that do not audate. You know, what is the potential there if we think about the term audate? And so I spent a lot of time thinking about my word choice. I actually can remember the moment when I struggled to capture what I wanted to say there. Language failed me as a writer. What I was trying to emphasize is that even those bodies whose linguistic sounds aren't voiced in a phonic sense may have, for example, percussive sounds or stops of air, in frustrating moments, or patterns of rapid pace signing. In some of Kirsten's videos, you'll hear that. You can hear the breath. You can hear the passion, even as she's gesturing in some of her narratives. And there was a debate with the piece about muting that sound. I was asked to mute it by some, do you need to make this silent? And I said, no, that is part of what she's communicating. That sound is part of what she's doing there. And I felt adamant about that. When I think of audate in my use of the term, I'm using it as kind of a cognitive aural. And this idea where we perceive sound as it is lived in a shared hearing experience. So I'm referencing bodies that do not audate as a way of nodding to sonic experiences that are embodied apart from the ear, literally apart from hearing. I'm still not entirely sure where that sonic experience is actualized, which is really the point of what I learned. I don't think there is the place. But I know, for example, that a tree can fall even if it's not heard, without being reductive in that metaphor, because I'm still thinking about this idea. Sound exists even if they're not orally heard. And so I think when we talk about sound writing and we talk about sound writing pedagogy, we have to think about those bodies who experience sound apart from the ear. And it's so deconstructed that it's hard for me to even articulate. And I confess that my own phenomenological experience with sound is so oral, is so grounded in the ear, that I've really had to stretch to think about that. But when I say bodies that do not audate, that's what I'm trying to get at. I'm trying to think about bodies that create and experience sound, but not centrally in the ear.
Now, my second question. You assert that sound studies must move beyond hearing-centric rhetoric about sound writing. You also describe it as sticky, that your advocacy for the value of deaf perspectives may be reliant on its opposition to hearing perspectives. Your collaborative effort makes it evident that the sonic experiences of a deaf person and the sonic experiences of a hearing person are not mutually exclusive. Could you reflect on some other conversations you had with each other and with other students in your course throughout the semester? How might those conversations illustrate the dialogic process of learning through embodied sonic experiences?
Another question was about moving beyond hearing-centric rhetoric. And this is so sticky because the language we use is so shaped by our experience, and so often it is located in this binary. How do we define a thing? We define a thing by what it is not. And we falsely create a binary of hearing and deafness that I think fails to account for a wide range of sonic experiences. For example, I have a daughter who, biologically speaking, is a normally hearing person, but she's a phenomenal musician. She, at 15, has played the violin since she was 3. She has an incredibly well-tuned ear. I don't know if she has perfect pitch, but she has no tolerance for certain types of sounds. Literally, they give her pain. They create pain when she hears them if they're too loud, if they're too dissonant. So that Likert scale we might imagine of hearing and deafness, she doesn't fall in that, in the fact that a lot of things are noise to her that may not be to me. I think when we think about how we illustrate the dialogic process that I and Kirsten have discovered was so helpful, we have to think as teachers that it's not our place to lecture about affordances of sound. It is our place to create experiences where we experience sound together in a range of modalities, sound that's visual, sound that's felt, and then use dialogue with one another to talk about how we're experiencing that and how that is meaningful through us. Throughout this course, referenced in the piece, Kirsten and I would meet prior to class and we would talk about, well, here's an activity I had in mind. How do you think we should design this activity so that different experiences could be had? You know, if we, for example, record a soundscape, you might think, well, the people who import it into Audacity will experience different sounds in the environment. Well, how would someone experience that who physically could not hear the sounds? Well, in what way are those sonic waves visual when they're imported in Audacity? And how might you manipulate the visual using various, distortion techniques or volume or tracking or things like that? And how would that impact the sonic experience? So we would experiment with that. In a previous multimodal composition class, I had a student, Carol, who would self-identify as severely hearing impaired, although she could read lips quite well and could hear some because of some hearing devices. Carol ended up doing a piece that was accepted into the Journal of Undergraduate Multimedia, and her piece is about silence and about silence as a kind of noise. How in especially a large room with lots of people talking, she can't discriminate between voices, and it really becomes white noise for her. And she and I spent a lot of time talking about that. So I guess in many ways, this is also coming from a world of critical pedagogy where the meaning in these experiences in the learning about sound is made in the spaces where power is shared, where the teacher does not know all and distribute all about what sound and sound writing is. And dialogue is key. That's hard because we have to be willing to allow ourselves to be vulnerable and open, and we have to accept that knowledge is dynamic. And that's also exciting. So I'm going to just assume that I will spend the rest of my career talking with different people about sound and sound writing and learning about everyone's unique experiences in those exchanges.
Now the last question. In your conclusion, you affirm that in our zeal to advocate for soundwriting pedagogies, we should not create a history of rhetoric that excludes deafness. As the field of sound studies continues to expand, what strategies would you suggest scholars use to ensure that a wide range of bodies can participate in the shared sonic experiences of innovative sound-centric conferences and publications?
So the question about what strategies should we use to ensure a wide range of bodies can participate in conference and publications is a good one. I think once you let's say this feels a bit like the Matrix. Do we want the red pill or the blue pill? Once you see the Matrix here, and that is how ableism informs so much of the text that we create and limits participation and access for so many bodies that are unaccounted for. Once you recognize that, I think you are called not to participate in that in the same ways that we carefully make sure that we don't participate in discrimination against a wide range of bodies. And for us in conferences and publications, it's very disturbing how often one modality becomes the means through which someone can participate. And if that happens to be a modality that's inaccessible for them, then now they can't hear, or they can't see, or they can't move through an activity they're being invited to do. So I think there's no excuse anymore. We need to create accessible text with redundant modalities. If I'm speaking at a conference, I might also need a visual, and if there's a video, closed captions and a transcript. If I play a sound, I need to have a transcript and maybe even a synthesizer. Why not color and shape to illustrate a point I'm also making? It's time for us to make sure that we as scholars don't just this is cliche, but talk the talk. We need to also visualize and walk and gesture and use space. And we need lots of ways to access the talk. We need to not only advocate for these changes, but we need to be doing them. And yes, I realize that's hard, and there's a learning curve there. But I think that we live in a world where open access software and tutorials are so available that there's really no excuse for us not learning this.
Thank you so much for answering all of the questions.